I'm Leo, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. Thank you for being here today. It's great to see everybody. We'll go ahead and get started with the third step prayer. And if you want to follow along, it's on page 63 of your big book. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do, I will always. All right. Okay. Well, we're getting started with a new chapter today. Rob wasn't going to be able to make it today, so we've got Bill from New Jersey that's going to fill in for us. So it'll be the two of us today instead of Rob and I, with Bill following up. And we are on chapter 5, how it works. If couple people here, let's see, Sean. All right. This chapter was written in 1938. I'm going to get started with the first paragraph, and then we'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll open it up with Bill having a few things to say as we go along. Bill?
Okay, on chapter 5, page 58. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest.
Absolutely. I think this chapter is one of the most read chapters. Paragraphs is one of the most read paragraphs that, in the book. Especially the first sentence there. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And then they go on to say, incapable of being honest with themselves. I think one of the things that we really want to kind of hone in on with regard to how it works is the absolute need to be rigorously honest with yourself. And we've talked about this a little bit before in the previous chapters, and part of our thing is that you personally have to have this kind of innermost kind of private honesty with yourself. It's not enough to say I'm going to get sober and I have had this spiritual experience, et cetera, et cetera. It is a requirement to be successful in this program, and that is that rigorous honesty that we all understand and have to have. Again, it ends up with this paragraph at the very end. Many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Can't say that enough in regards to a requirement for success. Bill?
But basically what Bill did, he put the word honesty 3 times in this first paragraph. That's because being honest is really important. And he's talking about being honest with yourself. He's not talking about cash register honesty. He's talking about if you don't get honest with yourself, you're going to have a hard time getting this. And he says if you don't live a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty, your chances are less than average. It doesn't say you can't get sober, but he says your chances are going to be less than average if you don't get honest with yourself. So what this is telling us here, that honesty is very, very, very important for getting this program. And like Leo mentioned, this is probably one of the most read things in AA and probably the least paid attention to. When they read it in the beginning of meetings, people are usually looking out the window or fooling around with each other or getting coffee or whatever, and nobody pays attention to it. There's a lot of real good information in here. All right, let's go on to the next paragraph. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps.
Yeah, and when we talk about certain steps, we're talking about all of them, all 12 steps, and we'll talk more about those 12 steps in detail as we go along. Um, the idea here is that what happened and what we are like now. So there's kind of the story of how we got to where we are and how we are now, so that you get a kind of an idea of both. And it's done in a general way. It's, we can't just go into detail about everything that we've got because it would just take too long and we would lose a lot of people in the process. This whole idea here is to go to any length to get it. And what we mean by that, we're not talking about, running down the street with no clothes on, going to any length, in the snow or something like that. We're just talking about the fact that you're willing to actually do the rigorous work that's required, being totally honest with yourself, and doing all of the steps, and embracing all of the steps, and doing them thoroughly. Bill?
Yeah, it says in here, if you have decided you want what we have, whose decision is it? It's your decision. Nobody can make you do this. It's up to you whether or not you do it. And this is telling you it's your decision. You decide whether or not you want what we have. Okay, the next paragraph. At some of these we bought. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely.
Yeah, this is also a very tough thing to do. I know it's easy to say, but the idea here is that you have to be fearless and thorough from the very start. And that is that you have completely and totally embraced the steps and taken them to heart in the manner in which they were intended to be taken. And trying to hold on to old ideas, there's, we can't really pick and choose. We've got to be in a situation where we literally have to do everything, all of the things thoroughly and 100%. And you've got to let go of the old ideas. If you've had some misgivings and or resentments and or reluctance to a higher power, the idea here is that you've got to let go of those old ideas, let them set aside and clear your mind, open your mind, and really embrace the steps thoroughly. Bill?
Yeah, it says right here, the first thing it says, that some of these we bought. What are they talking about? They're talking about the steps. The line before that, you're ready to take certain steps, then says that some of these we bought. In other words, we'll do 1, 2, 3, then when we get to 4, well, wait a minute, now I don't want to do that 5. Oh, no, I'm not going to tell anybody anything. Step 9, what? Give back the money? Wait a minute. We start balking at things. Why? Because we're looking for an easier, softer way. There are no directions in this book for an easier, softer way. We have to follow through with the course that's outlined here. And like Leo said, we have to get rid of our old ideas. And they told us that in the previous chapter. They told us several times we had to get rid of our old ideas. Because if we keep doing things the way we were doing them, it didn't work. So we have to get new ideas. Okay, the next paragraph. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon.
Absolutely. So a couple of things here is that remember that we can't remember. And it is one of those things that plagues alcoholics is that they forget about the debacles, the things that are said that are damaging and hurtful. And the fact that we cannot take any amount of alcohol, whatever, and have any form of success with it. And they really do remind us of exactly what alcohol is, and that's that cunning, baffling, and powerful thing that has control of us, and our own self-will, power, and decisions to make on our own are not enough for us to be able to overcome alcohol, and we need to find our higher power and let go and let the higher power enter in and do what is necessary. Half measures availed us nothing. You just can't do this part way, halfway, a little bit here, a little bit there. You really do have to embrace the entirety of this program. And finding your higher power, you have to let go completely and allow your higher power in to be there and to take the lead and take over. And when we talk about complete abandon, we're talking about a surrender, same thing. And the idea here is that you have to be honest. We've talked about that in the last few paragraphs. There has to be a willingness to do this completely, and you have to surrender in its entirety in order to have this program work for you. Bill?
Yeah, it says here, there's one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Now means now. It doesn't mean 6 weeks from now. It means right now. That's what we're supposed to do. And half measures availed us nothing. That means we can't do this halfway. Did you ever get drunk by going halfway to the liquor store? No, we have to go all the way through with something if we want to get any kind of results. And basically what Bill did, he's giving us 3 different criteria that we need to follow along with in order to get this. In the beginning, he told us we have to be honest. Then he told us we have to be willing to go to any length. Then he told us we have to surrender to God or abandon ourselves to God. Those are 3 requirements that Bill put in here that we need to do in order to get this process so it'll work for us. All right, the next paragraph, and here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
Yeah, so let's talk about each of these steps as we go along. We'll try to keep this going pretty quickly. However, I think there's a couple of things that we want to try to do when we kind of look at and break down the steps and understand them as they're meant to be understood. Steps 1, 2, and 3. If you would, I've got this in my book. Is 1, 2, and 3 are the foundation steps. Getting you kind of started on your path to recovery and sobriety. Steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are your action steps. This is where you're going to apply some effort and doing some things in order to have success. And then steps 10, 11, and 12 are your growth and or maintenance steps. I think I've heard it more called your maintenance steps, but those are the ones where you're going to apply on a near daily basis and constantly. So let's break down a couple of things on each one of the steps as we go along. Step one, I have written down as the honesty step. We have to be completely honest that we are powerless over alcohol. Step two, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity is our hope step. Step three, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God is the faith step. Step four, fearless moral inventory. This is going to be our courage step in short terms here. Admitted to God and ourselves and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs is our integrity step. You have to have complete and total honesty with yourself and with another person in order for this to be successful. We're entirely ready to have God remove all, and we underline all, these defects of character. That's the willingness step, willingness. Step seven, remove our shortcomings is the humility step. And have some humility when you're asking to have all of your shortcomings removed. Step eight is the forgiveness step, listing all persons that we have harmed and willing to make amends to them all, every one of them, no matter how hard or easy it might be. There has to be forgiveness. Make direct amends to such people wherever possible. That is our justice step. And I also made a note here, your biggest amend is really to your higher power. Just something as to think about. Step 10, the continue to take personal inventory and where we were wrong, promptly admitted it. This is the perseverance step. Step 11 is prayer and meditation. Is giving you awareness. It's your awareness step. And then step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs is our service step. So there's quite a bit with regard to the steps. It's one that is talked about. This section of the book is read at the beginning of a lot of meetings, and it's probably one of the least listened to. And truly, it takes a little bit of time to actually sit down and listen to these steps and go through them. It's why we kind of take our time with them at this point to do a general overview of them. But the idea here is that you really do want to listen to this section, to understand this section, and to be able to apply this section. And remember that in order for all of this to work, you have to be honest, you have to be willing, and you have to surrender to it all. There's not a pick and choose type of thing. It is something that you need to do in its entirety. Bill.
Oh, yeah. The sentence right before all the steps are listed, it says, here are the steps we took which are suggested as a program of recovery. It doesn't say here are the steps we sat around and talked about taking or philosophized about. We're supposed to take these steps. That means we're supposed to do them. We're supposed to follow along with the instructions on what they say, and we're supposed to do what it says. And this is suggested as a program of recovery. This is the program. That's probably one of the best kept secrets in AA. What is the program? The program is the 12 steps. The program is not, the 12 steps are not part of the program. The program is the 12 steps. A lot of people, including myself, when I first came into AA, I thought the program was sitting around in meetings, drinking coffee, eating donuts, and talking about my stuff. And that's what most people think when they first come into AA. That's not the program. That's the fellowship. The program is these 12 steps that are listed here. The only way you can do a 12-step program is to do the 12 steps. If you're not doing the 12 steps, you're not doing a 12-step program. I don't care how you try to rationalize it or justify it. So they're telling us right here what the program is. It's these 12 steps that are listed. And when we get to step 12 is in 3 parts. The first part is having had a spiritual awakening. That's a promise. That's one of the biggest promises in this book, that we're going to have a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. The second part is a mandate. We try to carry this message to other alcoholics. We're being told what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to carry this message. After we get the message, we're supposed to pass it on to other alcoholics. And the third part is an instruction to practice these principles in all our affairs. I'm supposed to practice this stuff in everything that I do. I'm supposed to incorporate this whole program into my life, and then my life will get better. Okay, the next paragraph. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is, we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection.
Yeah, can you imagine if the requirement was to be perfect 100% without fail, no mistakes, zero defect mentality, and we would all basically fail in our efforts in order to be able to do this. And the idea here is that we're basically giving you the human side of things, and that is that mistakes are going to be made. It's okay. Just correct as best you can, adhere to as best you can, and try each time to be as close to these steps as you can possibly be. Do not get discouraged. I know it's hard, and I'm going to have to admit that there were times when I thought that this was going to be impossible for me to do, and I wasn't really at a point where I had actually accepted a higher power. I hadn't been totally honest with myself. I was in the process of getting there, but I just wasn't there yet, and there was some level of discouragement that I was having. And it's just basically saying, try not to be discouraged. Continue to try. Keep working towards getting these steps right. And but here it is. It's the thoroughness and the honesty, and again that willingness to actually try your very best in order to do this. And what we mean by our very best isn't 110%, because really nobody gives 110%. You can only give up to 100%. And I'm here to tell you that most of the time, if you are realistic about anything, you're probably giving it anywhere from 60 to 80, maybe 90% at certain times. And the idea here is that, again, we're human, and it's going to take some time to be able to get there. It is a willingness to grow along spiritual lines, and these are guides to progress. And we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. I don't know anyone that can be perfect in this whole process. Bill?
Okay, I can't really add anything to that. I'll go to the next paragraph. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could ever relieve our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Yep. And kind of thinking here is that before and after, it's the before and after they got sober. So there is the process of what they did in order to get sober, and then the result of that is the after, and it really has to involve the steps in the process here with regard to the program of recovery. A is really a step 1. It's another way of saying step 1, and this also has to involve our thinking. B and C are really just different ways of talking about step 2. And idea here is, again, and they reinforce this, is that no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. Bill?
Yeah, it says our description of the alcoholic. That was the doctor's opinion in chapters 1, 2, and 3. That's where they give us a description of the alcoholic. The chapter to the agnostic, that was chapter 4. The previous chapter to this, we agnostics. And our personal adventures before and after, those are the stories in the back and Bill's stories. All the personal adventures that these people went through before and after, like Leo said, before and after they got sober. Before they got sober and after they got sober. And that gives us these 3 pertinent ideas. And the 3 pertinent ideas are steps 1 and 2. And he broke it down into A, B, and C, and it just comes out to steps 1 and 2. And it says, and C, that God could and would if he was sought. It doesn't say you have to find God. It just says you have to seek God. If you look for God, you will find something. Whatever your description is, whatever your understanding is, you'll find something if you seek him. Okay, the next paragraph. Being convinced. We were at step 3. This is that we have decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do?
Okay, so there's a couple of questions here, which are going to get answered specifically. That's one thing I want to make clear as we kind of go through this. And then the other part of this is being convinced now. Okay, so being convinced of steps 1 and 2, and where we are now, we are at step 3, which is what we're going to talk about in some detail here over the next page or so. We were convinced that got me ahead of myself, with life over to the God as we understood him. All right, what do we mean by this, and what do we do? This thinking and actions of where we are and what's going on. Bill?
Yeah, it says being convinced. Being convinced of what? Of A, B, and C, what we just read in the previous paragraph. In other words, if we're convinced of step 1 and step 2, then we're at step 3. Bill Wilson is making a declaration here. He's saying steps 1 and steps 2 have been thoroughly covered by this point. So now you're ready to move on to the next step. Okay, the next paragraph. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits.
Yeah, we're going to be a little bit of both in regards to the descriptions that we have here. And this is going to be a part of, and what we're in the middle of describing is the human condition. And that is that we are going to be driven by our own self-will, and we're going to try to do things on our own. They go into a rather detailed description here of an actor who wants to run the whole show. That struggle between being kind or mean, considerate or egotistical, patient or selfish, generous or dishonest. I mean, it's just a back and forth. There's going to be some elements of both as we go along, and it's really kind of a tough thing to kind of overcome. And what we try to do is to let go completely. All right, we're going to not run our life on self-will. There's going to be no success with that. That's part of the honesty that you have to come to terms with, and that is that you know that you don't have your own power or ability to overcome alcohol, being alcoholic and your sobriety as a part of that. And this is really kind of the start of the solution here, is you kind of thoroughly go through steps 1 and 2. You embrace that you are there, and you start your step 3. And this is the process by which you're going to go through. And you're going to have to let go of this self-propulsion, and allow that question of what would my higher power do here at this point in time, and really listen to it. What is the next right thing to do? And that's part of the process here. Bill?
Yeah, notice he says right in the beginning of this paragraph, the first requirement. Up to now, we were talking about suggestions. Now he's calling it a requirement. Bill's getting a little more pushy now. He's telling us what we need to do, not just what's suggested for us to do. And basically what he's saying is that we try to control everybody in our lives, and we try to order everybody around and tell them what to do, and that's not working. All right, let me move on to the next paragraph. We're on page 61, the first new paragraph. What usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony?
Now, this is what we do, and this is what we are. It is a hard thing to accept. If you were to replace I and me in here instead of he and him, this would read very much in a personal way as we would go through this. One of the things that we have as our biggest stumbling blocks in our sobriety is that the delusion that we can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only you manage it well. Again, that the idea here is that you're not going to be able to do this under your own self-will and self-power. All right, and admitting he may be somewhat at fault. That's, again, another way of saying being honest with yourself. And that's a very difficult thing to do. We're trying to really kind of show that here. We're kind of giving you some examples of how to kind of apply this and really start to personalize what this is, so that you really do understand what it is in your step 3 and what's required of it. Blaming other people, that's a big deal. We always point the finger at someone else. And really, if we were to sit down and be honest with it, with ourselves, we would find that there is somewhere, somehow in the past, something that we have done in order to make somebody else kind of retaliate and or go against us. So another way of looking at it is that we want to understand that more than likely you have some responsibility and you are personally at fault. Bill? What Bill Wilson's trying to do here is trying to show us what we're like. He put this in here so that we could identify with this and we could see how we act and what we do. And like Leo said, you can change anywhere where it says he or him. You could put I or me in there, and that makes it hit home more. It makes it more personal if you put the first person in. All right, the next paragraph, the last paragraph on page 61. Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation, the minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century, politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave, the outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations,
Are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity?
Yeah, and that's just to reinforce we are only concerned with ourselves, and that clearly shows up here in the ideas that are being presented, as Bill is putting it in here. We're talking about being self-centered and egocentric. All of us, well, most of us anyway, are not willing to actually admit that to ourselves that we are in fact that way. And it goes through to say some of the examples here in regards to people that are either lazy, they're not willing to step up, they're just complaining about others, and they think that they've themselves been wronged, and they're owed something by society and others. But whatever our protestations, this really means disagreements, are not most of us concerned with ourselves. Again, our own resentments, which is really a killer when it comes to our process in the program of recovery and in our sobriety and in our self-pity. We just are out there feeling sorry for ourselves. I know that that's a feeling that I had in regards to that. And admittedly, I was, I was hating that I was have to admitting failure at not being able to control my drinking like a normal drinker, not to be able to drink and enjoy it in a manner in which was socially acceptable. I went through a lot of this myself. Bill?
Yeah, Bill's giving us examples here of the way we think and things that we complain about all the time. If you're talking about the problem, you're not talking about the solution. So he's basically giving us some examples here, and he's going to tell us we need to stop doing that a little bit later on. And he says, are most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, and our self-pity? In other words, me, 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 me. That's what our problem is. We have to get rid of that mindset. All right, the first new paragraph on page 62. Selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we inevitably find that at some point in time, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt.
How many times does he say self in here? We're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different times that we're talking about self. So that's part of the problem that we have. I'm sorry, that would be 6 actually. Selfishness included, and we are. I mean, that's just naturally the human condition that we are in, and that is that we are selfish and self-centered. We want it to be our way. We want to have it all, and we don't want to have to necessarily have to go through the process of working with it and really applying the honesty that's required and the thoroughness that's required for us to embrace that. And that's why we really want to dig into this third step, because it is so important to get. Bill?
Yeah, this book is telling me selfishness and self-centeredness, that's the root of my troubles. It's not everybody else, it's me. I'm making my own troubles for myself. That's the point Bill's trying to get across to us here. All right, the next paragraph on page 62. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help.
Absolutely. This is the whole idea of letting go, letting in your higher power, and really getting that assistance This is really a good paragraph of describing exactly what we've been talking about, and that is the human condition. And we really are trying to focus on me. It's really what you're looking at, and one of the things that you have to come to terms with is that yes, it is your life, but it is also your fault, and that is needs to be completely embraced and internalized. And when we talk about here, the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. Think of it as turning up the volume on music, and this is just a very loud version of what most people would listen to, with your self-will and the things that are going along there. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. Okay, you've got to let go of that, and you have to be humble. Big word here is humbleness, and have some humility as you go through the steps, and especially with step 3. And it's something that Bill spends a lot of time here on prepping for, understanding, and then applying step 3 to our lives. Bill?
And yeah, he's basically telling us that our troubles are of our own making. My life is my fault. That's basically what this is saying. And like Leo said, the extreme example of self-will, that means the volume turned up. All people have self-will, but alcoholics have it in the extreme. And it says above everything. You think that means it's important? Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. So much for the myth that this is a selfish program. This book is telling me I have to get rid of my selfishness. Why? It's going to kill us. That's what it says here. Or it kills us. We must, or it kills us. They're threatening us with death if we don't get rid of our selfishness. And we can't do it alone. We need to have God's help. That's basically what he's telling us here. Now, if you remember on page 60, he gave us a first requirement that we had to be convinced that life run on self-will can hardly be a success. There's going to be 8 requirements that Bill mentions in here. Here's the second and third requirement in this paragraph. The second requirement is that we must be rid of selfishness. And the third requirement is the end of that paragraph. We had to have God's help. Okay, the next paragraph on page 62, the last paragraph on the page. This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of a new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom.
Yeah, so listen, a couple of things here I've underlined. This is the how and the why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God, and we had to step aside and let our higher power in and do the work, because otherwise it's not going to work. And really what we're trying to say here is stop doing what doesn't work. Stop it, because we have proven time and again that we can't do this on our own, and we can look back at all of the destruction and the pain that we've caused. Let your higher power in to be your director, and that's easier said than done, but it's also something that you can actually do, and it doesn't take a lot to work at. Stop playing God, and we'll say that again and again throughout the process here. We are the ones that are going to be the followers, and that is a harder thing to do than you might think, but it is something that is possible. All right, the keystone, the concept of having your higher power in there to help is what makes the structure really strong. And if you're looking at an arch built with blocks, the very center at the very top, that block that's being placed in there, putting equal pressure on either side of the arch and making that structure very strong, is what is known as the keystone. Must, I'm going to say this in this regard, is used 76 times in the first portion of this book. So there are a lot of requirements in here, and I'll have Bill kind of point those out as we go along. Bill?
Yeah, basically, Bill is telling us we have to quit playing God. Why? Because it doesn't work. He's telling us we have to let go and let God. You can't pray to God if you're playing God. We have to stop that. We have to get rid of that. And then he's telling us that's what's going to be the keystone to our new triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. So in this paragraph, he gave us two more requirements for getting step 3. He gave us the 4th requirement and the 5th requirement. The 4th requirement is we have to quit playing God. And the 5th requirement is we're going to let God be our director. So that's basically what he's telling us here. Let go and let God. Stop trying to run the whole show yourself. All right, now we're on to the top of page 63. When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn.
Okay, what Bill just read was a paragraph full of promises. There's actually 9 of them in this paragraph, and I'll kind of outline them for you here now. We had a new employer being all powerful. 1, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. That was promise number 1. Promise number 2 is established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. Promise number 3 starts with more and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. Promise number 4, as we felt new power flow in. Number 5, as we enjoyed peace of mind. Number 6, as we discovered we could face life successfully. Number 7, as we became conscious of his presence. Number 8, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. And number 9, we were reborn. This is really quite important here for us to actually understand these 9 promises as we go along and prepare ourselves for step 3. Bill?
Yeah, this paragraph, like Leo pointed out, these are promises in the 3rd step. And how do we get these promises? When do they come out? It says right in the beginning, when we sincerely took such a position. What position? It told us in the previous page, that previous paragraph, we're going to quit playing God. We're going to let God be God, and we're not going to be God any longer. All of a sudden, we start to get these things. These promises start to come true for us. Okay, the next paragraph on page 63. We were now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him.
Yep. So this is really doing, you're now at step 3. So all of this work we've done previously was getting us prepped for being now at step 3. And then the actual reading of this this 3rd step prayer is really doing step 3. And if you kind of break it down, you have to realize that to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt admitting that you are in fact the problem, and it's another thing to really realize that you again are the problem, and you have to relieve yourself of the bondage itself. This whole step 3 is an idea. It's something that we have to understand thoroughly and completely. And then towards the end here of this prayer here is that to bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life is another way of kind of reinforcing that step 12 is really an important step that you're going to apply to your life and to help others. The next thing is that when you finish this prayer, as we've said, you've really now done step 3, and you at the end here that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. That's really moving from one place to another, and really, when you kind of look at it, you just kind of want to stop, you want to think, and then you want to apply the guidance that you get from your higher power. And that's really what we're trying to say here. Bill?
Yeah, this prayer says right here in the middle of it, relieve me of the bondage of self. It doesn't say the bondage of alcohol. It says the bondage of self. I'm what my problem is. I'm what's in my own way. I have to get rid of the bondage of myself. I'm what's holding myself back. And it says, take away my difficulties. Oh, we're talking about alcoholism. So what are my difficulties? Difficulties can be anything. They could be problems that you have or whatever. Well, as far as alcoholism is concerned, our difficulties are the mental part of alcoholism, where we pick up a drink when we don't want to. And we're asking God to take that away. That victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. That's actually step 12, snuck there in the middle. We're going to help other people. We're making a deal here with God. You're asking God to take away your difficulties, and in return, you're going to help other people get through their difficulties by telling them how God got you through your difficulties. So basically, that's what this is. This is almost like a deal or a contract that we're taking here or making, so that we're going to get better, and then we're going to tell other people how we got better. And he put 2 more requirements here in this paragraph. The 6th requirement for getting this step is to make sure we were ready. If you're not ready, you're not going to do it, and it's not going to work right. And the 7th requirement is to abandon ourselves utterly to him. Utterly means totally. So that's the 6th and the 7th requirement. And the next requirement, the 8th one, will be in the next paragraph. All right, we'll go on to the next paragraph. We're on page 63, the 3rd new paragraph. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once.
Yeah, felt at once is that bonding or relationship that you create with your higher power. What a powerful thing to have happen in this early stages of your recovery and in your sobriety. The idea here is that you take the spiritual step with the understanding, with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. In today's times, we usually will refer to this as our sponsor, somebody that has been there, done that, and also has your best interest in mind. We obviously want this to be very, very confidential. We are, of course, talking about our step 5, and in doing so completely and with entire honesty. Now, there's a lot of personal and private time that you're going to spend with your higher power, and the idea here is doing so. But actually, it's only a beginning. This is only the beginning of working through all of this in order to recover. Bill?
Yeah, he uses the term in this paragraph, spiritual advisor. Like Leo said, that we would call it a sponsor today. That's the closest thing in this book that comes to the word sponsor. And that's the only time spiritual advisor is used. And he says that the wording is quite optional. In other words, you can make up your own prayer if you don't like this prayer for whatever reason, as long as you're saying the same thing, as long as you express the same idea. And this is the 8th requirement that's required for getting this step, voicing it without reservation. When you say something out loud, you can't take it back. If you just say it to yourself in your head, you can make believe you didn't say it. Once you voice it and you say it out loud, it's done and you can't take it back. And it says this was only a beginning. That means we got a lot more to do. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. Step 3 is not the end of it. This is not a 3-step program. We have a lot more work to do. And it says that if this is honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. Some people start to get a spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening right at step 3. Some people have to go further. They don't get it till they get to step 12. Some people get it at step 9. Some people get it at step 5. I mean, it happens a little bit different for different people. But a lot of people start getting some sort of an effect right at step 3. When they made this decision to turn their will and their life over to the care of God, it lifts a load off of their shoulders, and all of a sudden they start to feel better and they start to get better. But they have to continue doing this in order to keep it, because it'll wear off. It'll go away. All right, that's all I got. And I think we're at the end of step 3. Do you want to stop here or keep going?
Yep. No, I think this is a great place to stop. I do want to, we'll close things out. And then Bill, if you wouldn't mind, after we get finished here, to summarize the 8 requirements one more time. I think that would help a couple of folks in the meeting. So let's go ahead and finish up with the serenity prayer. That's God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And stop the recording at this point.